Welcome to Lesson 9, Writing Content and Instruction. This slide talks to you about how to maximize your learning. By now it should be pretty familiar to you. Go ahead and read through it and think about how you can record some of the notes from the session through your points to ponder. The following are the lesson objectives for this lesson. 1. Assess the value of each of the 6 traits of writing. 2. Determine the writing skills assessed by the National Association of Educational Progress, NAEP. 3. Relate the writing skills assessed by NAEP with the writing skills included in the English Language Arts core curriculum and state frameworks. The expert cited is Ruth Culham, and she is the author of the 6+1 Traits of Writing. She has written 2 books, one on the 6+1 Traits of Writing for primary teachers and one for elementary teachers. The following are preview points to ponder. Number 1, which writing skills do you think are important for students to know and be able to do? You could pause this for a minute and jot down a few of your ideas, and then you'll have those to compare to the information that's presented through this lesson. Which writing skills have you emphasized in your teaching? The National Association for Educational Progress is the organization that tests and publishes test results in the nation's report card. It has published a framework for writing instruction, and you have a website to access this framework farther along in these PowerPoints. You should be pondering or thinking about which writing skills do you think they included in this framework. And do these writing skills match the ones that you think are important and the ones that you emphasize in your own teaching? And then last, we will be talking about the 6 traits of writing that are emphasized in the 6-trait program. And it's a very popular program right now. It's very effective from the early research. Why do you think it is such a popular program? And perhaps you can answer this question if you don't know yet after seeing some of it spelled out for you in this lesson. Well, we get right into the 6-trait writing program, and you can see the website at the top of your page. You can click on that. That enables you to access a good bit of that web page and their information. You can also log on, it's for free, and then you get to the interactive parts of the site as well. And they suggest that you can use that with the classes that you're teaching or with the students that you are teaching. 6 Traits Writing is a systematic approach for looking at writing one part at a time. This approach helps to break down the complex writing task and understand it better. The 6 Traits gives teachers and students a common vocabulary for talking and thinking about writing. Reasons to use 6 traits, and you'll see that little 1 after it, so that means there will be a series of slides on this topic. One reason to use 6 traits is a writer and a reader can analyze traits of good writing one at a time. And the reason why reader is included there is that writing and reading are complementary or reciprocal, and your students can learn how to analyze good traits of writing by reading good traits written by other authors. So they can either analyze their own writing or they can analyze the writing of others according to the traits that were used. Student writers are not overwhelmed by having to fix everything at once when they're focused on one trait at a time. And of course, you want to keep the pace lively, and so once they have mastered one trait or been introduced to it, you can move them into other traits and then revisit them as you want them to get better in a deeper level. The 6 trait rubrics enable students to self-assess their writing, and that's a very important trait where they use their own metacognition, their own self-regulatory skills to determine whether they're on the right track with their writing and what they have to do to make it better, and what the things are that they've already done that are good in their writing. This is the second slide on reasons to use 6 traits. This particular website enables you to log in and log in your class so that you have a lot of features that you can use. I have not used this website, and so I do not know how user-friendly it is. If you choose to do it, this is voluntary and not part of your class requirements. But if you choose to do it and have used it, I would welcome your comments on the discussion board. Now, here's some of the things that you can do when you register and log in. It's free. They say that it's all free. One thing, students can compare writing samples to ratings online, so they can compare their own writing to ratings. 2, students can work at their own pace on the interactive website. And 3, teachers can view and print out charts which give a profile of an entire classroom's work with the capability of viewing the results as raw numbers or bar graphs. Again, this is voluntary. This is sort of an FYI for your information slide. The 6 Traits Interactive website is designed for high school teachers but has excellent strategies for younger students. And this goes into it a little more about creating a free account if you wish to use the interactive features of the website. I have explored the website without creating the account and found that I could get good information on rubrics and examples on content, organization, voice, word choice, sentence fluency, and conventions. Moving on away from the 6 traits now and looking at the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and the assessment that they do. By looking at the ways your students are assessed in the various grades, grades 4, 8, and 12 through NAEP, you will find some of the things that you need to focus on as a writing teacher beginning in kindergarten. The NAEP assessment measures what students know and are able to do. The focus of the 2011 NAEP writing assessment are that students consistently make informed, effective decisions in all aspects of their writing. And these will be broken down somewhat. These are very general comments, but this is the big picture of what you want your students' writing to look like. Students will communicate effectively with their audience, and students move beyond formulaic approaches. The 2011 assessment for grades 8 and 12, they are allowed to use word processing software. For grade 4, they still use pencil and paper. This slide has points for you to ponder. And again, as you go through the slides, do stop and think about some of the issues, some of the concepts that you have been learning about in these different slides and try to pull them all together. It will help you in this course, related courses, and of course certainly on your comprehensive exams. This points to ponder relates to a quote at the bottom of the page. The quote says, "Writing is a complex, multifaceted, and purposeful act of communication that is accomplished in a variety of environments under various constraints of time and with a variety of language resources and technological tools." And you will find this quote on page 10 on the NAEP website that's listed above on this slide. Now, to break down the quotes so that you can think about each aspect of it is going to be helpful to you, I think. One, how is writing complex and multifaceted? What are the things that make writing complex so that you can break those down for your students? What is meant by writing as a purposeful act of communication? What are some time constraints that writers face? In school, you have the time constraints of the school day itself and how much time you can devote to each subject area. In the workplace, there are time constraints as well for when a report is due, when a memo is due. What is meant by using a variety of language resources and technological tools? And when you think about all of the language resources and technological tools that could be available to your students, this might help you expand your own writing program so that your students have a lot of resources at their disposal as they write. You also might consider the different resources so that you can add some of those into your thematic unit for this course. The following are the NAEP achievement level descriptors, and it's important to understand exactly when they label a student or a group of students as advanced, proficient, or basic, exactly what they mean. Advanced would be superior performance, proficient is solid, and it gives you some more details that you can read on your own. And then basic is partial mastery of prerequisite skills. Basic is below grade level, proficient is at grade level, and advanced is above grade level, if you'd like to think of it that way. In many cases, at least for reading, the NAEP also has a category of below basic. And below basic then is that basic is already below grade level, so below basic is just way below grade level, and you know that your students are in trouble if they are not at least at the proficient levels. The following are the genres that are assessed by NAEP, and you can read a more detailed explanation on page 11 of their document. Student writing is assessed at grades 4, 8, and 12 on the following communicative purposes. One is to have them persuade, one is to have them explain, and one is to convey experience, real or imagined. And on the one of the next slides coming up, you will actually see the percentage of times that students are asked to write on each of these three genres. One of the neat things about using various authentic sources such as NAEP, such as those practice guides, the IES practice guides, and articles, is that you start to see that it's not just one person recommending certain aspects of teaching language arts, but that many theorists and many researchers from around the world actually are making the same recommendation. So it validates a lot of what you are learning about, and it should make you feel a lot more comfortable when you start using some of these principles to realize that these are very accepted principles by a lot of people who have become experts in the teaching of writing. So if it seems a little redundant to you, it's because we're pulling from different sources, and there are certain truths that just exist about the teaching of language arts, and you'll see some of those reoccurring in this slide as well. Students should, and this comes off of page 5 from the document that has the website above on your slide. Students should understand that writing is a social act. You're usually reading something from somebody else, writing for somebody else, for an audience. Not always, but often. Students should demonstrate their awareness of the audience of their writing. And the easiest way to explain this is if you're writing a note about a school assignment to your best friend is the audience, you're going to be a lot more casual, using more colloquial terms with your best friend than you would if you were writing a description of the assignment to, say, another teacher. in which case your writing would take on a different tone. You would use different vocabularies. So it's important that students know the audience for their writing, because they're going to adjust the voice, the tone, the wording, and even some of the content based on the audience. Students should also develop and organize ideas commensurate with the writing task, what you're asking them to do. Are they persuading, explaining, etc.? And they should be able to choose appropriate text features of a specific genre. And the testing of students' ability to select appropriate text features applies to students in grades 8 and 12 on the NAEP assessment. However, students need to start learning this particular aspect of writing way earlier. They don't just start learning it in grade 8, but they'll start learning it earlier in their schooling. Key guidelines for writing tasks are shown on page 14 of the NAEP document, and they're divided into two different categories. The first one is the development of writing tasks, and as it's explained on the chart that's on page 14, they address the topics as the topics will address real, authentic experiences, and then it goes on with some other options for the topic. The purpose will be clearly stated, and the audience will be specified and familiar. And so those are things that they're looking for within the topic, the purpose, and the audience. And again, for a more detailed description of these, it's all in a nice chart. It's easy to follow, and you'll get a better sense of exactly what NAEP means by the development of writing tasks. Now, student engagement with tasks, these are things that the student is doing. And so for content, the student is making appropriate choices for content. For approaches to writing and thinking, the students are considering the purpose and the audience for their writing. And for form, the students will choose a form that would best communicate their thoughts in writing. So I do urge you to look at page 14, just get this framework up on your computer and look at it, and you will see the key guidelines for the writing tasks that you would be developing for your students, and therefore teaching them how to learn how to write based on these tasks. And these are the very tasks that are embedded into the NAEP assessment. The series of points to ponder on this slide relates to the key guideline for writing tasks that we went over from the NAEP frameworks. First of all, you should refer to the key guidelines on page 14 of that document. And then think to yourself, why do you think the guidelines are important to teach to students in grades 4 through 12? Why did NAEP select these particular guidelines as the ones that they thought were important enough to assess? How might the guidelines relate to the writing that's needed by students when they leave school and get out into the world? And so it's just kind of interesting to think about how the guidelines were selected. And of course, what is assessed is also being taught in the schools. And so just knowing specifically what's being assessed will help you prepare your students. And speaking of preparing your students, how could teachers in the early grades, grades K through 3, prepare their students for the 6 guidelines? How many of you remember the name Donald Liu and who he is? If you recall, I called him the guru of the new literacies, and the new literacies relates to the literacy skills that students need to have in order to use the internet and technology wisely and effectively. And NAEP, as you now know, has moved to computer-based assessment for students beginning in the 8th grade. And probably my prediction, I don't know if it's founded or not, but my prediction is that eventually it will be used for the younger students as well. But currently it is used for students 8th grade and 12th grade. And the rationale for using it is as follows. 87 to 93% of students ages 12 to 17 use computers regularly or occasionally to complete schoolwork and to access the internet. And I think even in the past year or two, this number has probably gone up. I think that occasionally is probably has diminished somewhat, and I think most students use some form of technology regularly. And of course, the percentages show that 87 to 93%. Number of computers available to students has increased, both in the schools and at the home. It's dangerous to assume that every student has a computer available to him or to her, but more and more this is happening. And even in the schools, if you have maybe just two or three in each classroom, many schools now have computer labs available to the students. Public libraries have computers available to students, and so they are a lot more available than they have been in the past. More students are writing with computers, and therefore, according to NAEP's thinking, they are tested on computers. Continuing our discussion on technology just for a little bit, some of the technology tools students need to learn are pre-writing tools such as a notepad, and these are just some examples given on that NAEP website. Formatting tools, and we all know about these: line spacing, indents, font size, bold, italics, etc., etc. Spelling and grammar tools, and there's been some debate about why teach spelling if you have spell check on your computer, and that's perhaps some people think that that's absolutely true, and the teaching of spelling is obsolete. People like me and others think that spelling is good to know because A, you don't always have computer spell check in front of you, and also it would slow you down if you had to rely on the spell check as opposed to having a cadre of words in your mind that you can spell correctly. The other thing that is available to students, and they need to learn how to use them, are the reference tools. And so pre-writing, formatting, spelling and grammar, reference tools, these all comprise what Donald Lu referred to as the new literacies. Now, thinking about the genres that students are going to be tested on, and on page 17, this goes into this in, of course, a much more detailed way, but I've pulled out some of the high points to show you on these PowerPoints. If you look at grade 4, first of all, they will be tested on writing to persuade 30% of the time, to explain 35% of the time, and to convey experience 35% of the time. Now, conveying experience is probably one of the easiest genres for students to use because they get to talk about themselves, and who doesn't like to do that? And the content is not a mystery to them. And so conveying experience is a good place to start for those reluctant writers or students who want to write but are just slow in catching on as to how to put together a piece that communicates their ideas. In grade 8, to persuade is at 35%, to explain is 35%, conveying experiences is down a little bit to 30%, probably because of the three genres, that is the easiest genre. And the testers want to know whether students at grade 8 can move beyond that in a meaningful way. Grade 12 persuades 40, explains 40, conveying experiences has dropped to 20. Interesting, I think. The NAEP assessment looks at specific features of writing that the students are doing. One has to do with development of ideas. They're looking at depth, complexity, approaches to their thinking. Were their ideas supported with examples? Did they give good details? Organization of ideas has to do with that text structure that we've talked about on other slides, and text structures vary among genres. Are the ideas coherent and are they focused? Focused ideas, I think, from my own experiences of grading writing, is one of the difficult things that students have to do in the organization of writing. It's very difficult for them sometimes to keep their focus on a specific idea and describe it in depth before moving on to another one, and then having the next idea relate and be organized in a way that the ideas flow in their writing. Uh, Language facility and conventions, how good are they at just their own language? Can they put together good sentences? Do they have sentence variety? Do they use good word choice? Voice and tone, grammar, usage, and mechanics. And a lot of these traits right here are addressed in the 6 traits of writing. And in fact, text structure and organization, in fact, all of these are, but I recognize specifically the language facility and conventions as being parts of the 6 traits. So they break these down and help you teach them. It's not the only program out there, the only way to do it, but it certainly is one that's very teacher friendly. So getting back to the 6 traits, which is what we opened up this lesson on, the series of lessons, I think they would definitely help you with this. On the slide right before this one, we went over features of writing that are assessed by NAEP, and those features were taken from the Mississippi frameworks, state frameworks. The next slide, this slide, has to do with features of writing from the Common Core state standards. And there you see that you have a link to get to it if you don't already own a copy of the state standards. In this case, the standards are addressing text types and purposes, and this occurs on page 18 of the particular document that you can access with that website. Text types and purposes, they want students to write arguments to support claims using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. They want them to write informative/explanatory text to examine and convey complex ideas and information clearly and accurately. And Common Core standards requires that students write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events. And you can see how similar these are to the state standards and to the standards that NAEP has put forth on its website as well. Continuing with the Common Core state standards, on page 18, they discuss production and distribution of writing, and this requires the students to produce clear and coherent writing in which the development, organization, and style are appropriate to the task, the purpose, and the audience. And if you recall in some of the other slides, we talked more at length about the purpose and the audience and how writing is a social act. Students are also to develop and strengthen writing as needed through planning, revising, editing, rewriting, or just trying a new approach. Students are required to use technology, including the internet, to produce and publish writing and to interact and collaborate with others. So they are required to use those new literacies, and they don't just acquire them naturally. Yes, they can do a lot on the internet and with technology, but to use it for good writing, they need to be taught. Common Core state standards also emphasizes research to build and present knowledge. And students will be required to conduct short as well as sustained research projects on focused questions. These are questions that can come from you, that can come from the students, or perhaps a combination of student questions along with your guidance. They are to gather relevant information from multiple print and digital sources, And they have to be able to understand whether these sources are credible or not. Are they accurate or not? Because now just about anybody can write about anything on the internet, and the students have to be able to determine which ones are written by people who truly know about the topic and which ones are not. This is all part of the new literacies that were addressed by Donald Blue. Uh, and then the last part of the statement, they have to integrate all of this information and avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism has to do with taking the words of an author and using them as your own words. In essence, it's the stealing of somebody else's words. A good rule of thumb that I use personally is that if I have 3 words that are exactly like the ones that the author used, I cite that author and give credit. So you have to teach the students because they don't know that they can't lift little passages here and there and insert them in their own writing and count them as their own. All right, and then the last one on research is to draw evidence from literary or informational texts to support analysis, reflection, and research. This all deals with the new literacy, and if you notice, it all requires high-level DOK 3 and 4 thinking. The Common Core State Standards also addresses the range of writing experiences where teachers would have students write routinely over extended time frames, perhaps starting a piece on Monday and then continuing that throughout the week or even 2 weeks or longer. And shorter time frames where they are going to put together a piece in a certain amount of time that's limited. And this really mirrors the authentic writing that is required by people in their jobs in the real world. Common Core State Standards for K-5 are designed to ensure that students gain adequate mastery of a range of skills and application. Each year, students gain increasing sophistication in writing. Students are expected to retain and build on skills each year. When you plan a systematic writing program and you individualize it or differentiate it for your students, you can make sure that the students are not just doing the same type of writing throughout the whole school year. Writing in journals is very good. Writing stories about my summer vacation and other experiences is very good, but you need to have them do different types of writing and to polish these pieces of writing so that as they go through the year, they are learning more and more features and techniques for how to make their writing even better. The following points to ponder are having you compare the Common Core State Standards to the elements of writing assessed in the NAEP 2011 Writing Framework. It's going to be very interesting to see how closely those two are aligned. Make a Venn diagram to illustrate the similarities and the differences. The genres assessed by the Mississippi Department of Education are very similar to the NAEP genres, and it would be very beneficial to actually make a direct comparison for the grade level that you teach between your state frameworks and the NAEP assessment. In Mississippi, students in grades 4 and 7 are tested on narrative writing, informative writing, and persuasive writing. In the 10th grade, English 2 students are tested on expository, a position paper, and response to literature.